It's been 6 years since our last David Fincher film, and if you ask me, or if you really ask anyone who loves the medium of film, that's been far too long. Now he's back with a new Netflix film with a script written by his late father, Jack Fincher, based on the making of Citizen Kane. Is all that time worth the wait? We're gonna find out here in our review of Mank.
Did you rub my lamp?
1,000 generations to the now.
Here we go.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? And welcome to FilmSpeak, where the conversation continues after the credits. If this is our first time meeting, hey, my name is Griffin. I'm an LA-based entertainment journalist and film critic, and if you want to be a part of that conversation, you're definitely in the right place. Consider subscribing to the channel for more insight, analysis, and interviews behind your favorite movies. Mank is directed by David Fincher, and it stars Gary Oldman, Amanda Seyfried, Charles Dance, Lilly Colins, and it takes place in 1930s Hollywood as the period is reevaluated through the eyes of scathing social critic and alcoholic screenwriter Herman J. Mankiewicz as he races to finish the screenplay of Citizen Kane. And today on this review, I am joined by fellow FilmSpeak contributor and contributor over at In Session Film, Ryan McQuaid. Ryan, great to have you on here, man. How's it going?
It's going good, Griffin. We're here to talk about some Mank.
For every moment in this film that feels like a Fincher-ism, the project as a whole is very different from him. It is a little bit more inside baseball, if you will, than some of his other projects. But at the same time, and you and I were briefly talking about this, it is sort of like the culmination of a lot of his explorations in his past work. And so it feels odd as a David Fincher film because it's not one of those serial killer crime thrillers or whatever. But in terms of just like what it's interested in saying, it is in a lot of ways David Fincher's his masterwork in a lot of ways.
This is the culmination of a 40-year career. He wanted to make this film way back in the 90s, but was sort of rejected by the studio because he wanted to make this in black and white, and he sort of wanted to take the old Hollywood approach with the digital technology and digital filmmaking that he is known for and that he sort of pioneered. And he's sort of championed and always been the champion of forward progress within the industry.
And it's interesting because I think in a lot of ways, I mean, you can see that there's a lot of reverence for this time period, but it's reverence for the people who really made it what it was. You know, people like Herman J. Mankiewicz. And then it's also like a pretty scathing takedown of just like the power structure at the time, the way the studio system operated and how it was basically in bed with politics at the time. I think what it does so well is that it takes a period of time that is often glamorized, and we kind of, erase the, less than glorious parts of it. But he really kind of looks at it in a different perspective, and he's like, no, a lot of the stuff that was going on in the studio system here was fucked. And it's only because there were people like Mank, working and really leading the charge here for a new structure and really championing creatives and the right and just voices that were able to, see a shift. To his point, it's still something that's very relevant in the film industry today. I mean, you talk about when he was trying to get this film made, and it's ironic, the film kept getting shot down and interfered with by other creative forces, and I feel like this movie is just both a love letter and just sort of a snarky jab at the whole Hollywood system.
Well, this might be his most personal film to date. I mean, not just because his father wrote the screenplay and his father has passed since, writing this idea, but a lot of Mankiewicz and what he goes through in the film and sort of the job and the toll that Hollywood takes on him and free speech and ideas of writers at the time and the politics and everything around Hollywood is very much the same stuff that Fincher has faced throughout his entire career, dating back to Alien 3, all the things that has happened there, the sort of studio interference that's occurred with that, plus other projects. He even has had trouble getting a lot of things financed over the last couple of years because he is been deemed difficult. It seems to be him scathing the industry of now that really hasn't changed from the industry of then. You really feel that Mank and Fincher are one here, and then that makes for sort of this holy experience when you're watching it, because if you go down this man's filmography and you're then watching this man's life unfold in creating his magnum opus, you can get the sense of why this might be Fincher's magnum opus and why this might be his brand new masterpiece. I mean, with The Social Network, he's criticizing social media and those big tech industries. With Gone Girl, he's criticizing media in general and how we consume it, how it evolves within inside of us. This is criticizing entertainment and criticizing money. And it's quite fascinating because these are the people that have been telling him no. So you know what he says? Fine, I'm going to go to Netflix, get a big check, and I'm going to make a movie exactly about you.
If there is one pattern in Fincher's like entire filmography, it's that he's a really cynical guy. And he sees the world, you know, in a really pessimistic way, but it's like he kind of has fun with it too. There's like a scene towards the end of this where it's like the realization that Mank is just sort of like a cog in this machine, and that everyone sort of has to serve like a higher power in this power structure. And Fincher kind of just, you know, he just presents it as this really jaded outlook.
Yeah, and then he uses Gary Oldman to sort of be the vehicle to spread his gospel.
Are you familiar with the parable of the organ grinder's monkey?
And Oldman's extraordinary. This might be
the
best performance of his career, if not top 3 for sure. It's way better than his Oscar-winning performance in Darkest Hour, and it could lead to another Oscar nomination for Oldman for sure, because he really has to carry this picture. If you can see Oldman on screen, you can see Fincher on screen. It is really funny that he has this damning critique, right? That Mank has this critique, and that nobody wants it published, nobody wants it done, and yet at the end, the Oscars celebrate it, right? The industry celebrates it as a whole and gives Mank an Oscar. And I feel like we're going down that route too, is that Fincher's been criticized and blamed for and demonized by this industry so many times. Yet when it comes down to it at the end of the year, I think they're going to be handing him an Oscar for Best Director.
The last, you know, without giving anything away, obviously, if you know the story of Citizen Kane and whatnot, the history behind it, the ending of this movie is just, I think it's summed up in one final line, which is just like, well, that's Hollywood. There's a lot of meta subtext in here. I think it has a lot to say just about our culture in general. And the thing that is really genius about this movie is that he's able to capture the tone, the spirit, and the craftsmanship of Citizen Kane in order to bring forth, you know, the events and the culture of the time period that really shaped it into what it is.
No, I totally agree. I mean, this world building that he does is extraordinary. I mean, Fincher is one of the greatest directors living today. So it's not surprising that the cinematography, the editing, the score by Reznor and Ross is great, again, as usual, and the performances are out of bounds. There's no question about that. But really, it is, I think, that script. Like the ultimate thing that this movie really boils down to is, does the idea really contextualize and make itself? And going into this, Griffin, you explained that this movie is sort of about the making of Citizen Kane. And I think that that's actually been a false advertisement. This is about the creation of the idea that is incepted in the mind of Mankiewicz in order to create the script. This is all about inspiration and how a creative gets inspired nowadays and back then. And it's funny that we see Mankiewicz in a room full of writers, and that's really where he seems comfortable with sort of leading that.
That's director proof.
But where he makes his best work of his career is by himself, really just alone with a typewriter and having somebody type up his sort of crazy notes that are kind of in this pool of whiskey and sweat. Ultimately, our best stuff is either caffeine or alcohol sitting next to us while we're writing our pieces. So it's very personal to a writer's perspective in this film.
Yeah, no, for 100%. And not even like a writer, but really like any creative, I feel, can relate to Mank's sort of journey in this movie. It's like you produce your best work when you're in some sort of pain, torture, the whole, the tortured artist sort of thing. I loved how he transitioned in and out of flashbacks as like new ideas would come to him. And it's like, okay, this is clearly what inspired this portion of the film. And this is sort of how he switched around characters. We learn a little bit more about Rosebud in this, which I thought was great. If you know Citizen Kane, you're going to love this movie. But even if you don't know Citizen Kane, or if you've never seen it before, it will take you a little bit to get on board with what's happening, but you're still able to appreciate it for the, well-researched, articulated deconstruction of Hollywood that it is. And I think that's a really tricky thing to pull off, because the film has been getting criticized for being very inside baseball, which I totally understand, because it did take me a little bit to get on board with the film. But I do think it is, you just got to pay attention, right? Like, you can pick up what's going on and you can get the broad strokes of everything, and then maybe go watch Citizen Kane and you'll be able to appreciate everything else in this movie a lot more. Yes, it's a film for cinephiles, but it is a film for just creatives in general.
For me, I mean, what is more universal than a sort of criticism of Hollywood or a look at Hollywood? I mean, last year we literally had a movie called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Jesus Christ!
And it had a murder that is well renowned in that, and there were still people that didn't know, but yet they were able to enjoy it. And I think you're right, Griffin. You're going to be able to go into Mank and enjoy this because of the way that Fincher presents everything. It's a presentation of an artist struggling and trying to create something. I mean, we all are trying to create something. So at the end of it, it really is just about us versus the machine. Mm-hmm. And that's a very universal thing, especially nowadays, more than anything.
That's Fincher. That's Fincher in a
that
nutshell.
is so Fincher.
Yeah.
And so if you're a fan of his or just a fan of the movies that he's created, you're going to walk into this thing and you're going to feel at home. Like, that's to me what I felt like. I felt like, oh my God, I've been away from this man for 6 years. I finally have him back. He's not really doing, I would say, a greatest hits. For me, I think he's just evolving more and more. Time has made him even better. He's taken lapses in his career and he's come back with sort of damning critiques and wonderful examinations. He did that with Zodiac and gave us a run of 4 films. He's now signed a deal with Netflix for the next 4 years. I expect another film to follow it. Maybe it's an adaptation, maybe it's something else, but we could be looking at a new charting of David Fincher's career 40 years in. And I think that that's wonderful, because if we're getting movies like Mank, we're getting some really strong, dense cinema here.
Before we give you our final verdict on Mank, guys, why don't you take a second here and like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already for more insight, analysis, and interviews behind your favorite movies. All right, Ryan, closing thoughts on Manx, and then what would you give this thing out of 10?
Man, I just say it is the film I wanted to see again more than anything I've seen so far this year. I've seen a ton of things, Griffin, as we talked about offline, but this is the one I can't wait to see. I hope everybody sees it. I hope everybody goes in an open mind and really just takes it in. I think this is going to be a new Fincher classic that we're sort of, going to get used to. And I'm just thankful that it exists and I love it. But out of 10, I will give this a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, I think for a 2 hour and 44 minute movie, which is the runtime on this film, it definitely flows very well. It's really, I mean, it's Fincher. All of his long movies are well paced. It gets to the point where it just feels very lyrical and hypnotic in a way, just through the pacing, the use of lights, the transitions. I mean, it's a really impressive technical marvel that I think authentically and lovingly captures the filmmaking sensibilities of the time period and of Citizen Kane, but it never ever feels gimmicky, which is not an easy thing to pull off. That is incredibly difficult to do. I will say I wish he shot on film. I really do. I think it would have added an extra layer to the
I like the
authenticity
blend though. I like the blend though. I think he does a good job with it.
That being said, it is well done in that regard. Listen, it's a dense piece of cinema. It's probably going to leave some audiences at arm's length a bit, and I can understand that the script is very inside baseball, but once you sort of accept what's going on and you get into the film, I know for me it took a little while to get on board, but once I got on board, It's Fincher doing what he knows best, and it dissects the film industry in such a captivating way that only Fincher could do. So for me, I'm going to be giving this film an 8.8 out of 10. But now we want to hear from you all, and we want to know what your favorite David Fincher film is down in the comment section below. And if you got a chance to see Mank, be sure to let us know your thoughts and opinions on that down there as well. Thank you so much, Ryan, for joining me on this review. Where can everyone find you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at RyanMcQuaid77. You can find me at FilmSpeak.com. I write stuff over there, as well as InSessionFilm.com and over at AwardsWatch.com.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely go give. Yeah, I can't speak. Definitely go give his work a look. He does excellent stuff, and he's writing some great things over at FilmSpeak, so definitely keep an eye out for that. If you haven't done so already, be sure to like FilmSpeak on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, just search FilmSpeak. And lastly, if you like me specifically and you like what I have to say, you can give me a follow on Twitter at Griff Schiller. All right, that's going to do it for this review, guys, and until next time, take care.